Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Image Center. My name is Paul Roth, and I am the director of the IMC. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight for the launch of our new book, Facing Black Star. Facing Black Star is the sixth book in our IMC Books imprint with MIT Press. And we are very, very proud of this book and of the series that it is part of. We're therefore quite happy to be hosting tonight a panel discussion with the book's editors, Thierry Gervais and Vincent Lavoie, and contributors Bénédicte Ramade and Reilley Bishop-Stahl. Tonight's panel will be moderated by Elspeth Brown. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we're broadcasting from Toronto Metropolitan University, located on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We embrace our shared and ongoing responsibility for the land where this event is happening. I'd like to mention a few program notes before we begin tonight. The event is happening both virtually and live in front of an audience here in the Image Center, and I want to thank all of our guests tonight, both here and at home, for being with us for the second hybrid program that we have hosted in concert with our IMC book series. We're recording tonight's panel, and we will be uploading the video of it to our YouTube channel in the near future for those who can't be here tonight, who can't attend online, or for those who want to watch it again. After the discussion, we are going to have a Q&A session. We'll be taking questions from those here in person, as well as viewers watching virtually. For those of you who are watching from home, if you do have anything that you'd like to ask of our panelists, please use the Zoom Q&A function, which is located at the bottom of your screen, to submit your question. For those of you who are here in the audience, once we're in the Q&A portion of the program, just raise your hand and one of our staff will pass you a microphone. And lastly, in the case of a technical difficulty, we thank you for remaining patient with us while we work to correct whatever issue it is. I'd like to give you some background about IMC Books, our scholarly imprint with MIT Press. IMC Books was launched in 2016 and is comprised of three thematic streams. The first is called Critical Ideas. For this stream, we commission essays from various scholars on a single theme in history, a specific topic that is important in the history of photography. We call the second stream Essentials. This category involves republishing critical books and essays in English if there is no English language edition. And we also bring older seminal photo history publications back into print. Our third stream is Collections and Archives and aims to explore aspects of the Image Center's important collections so that we can give readers new points of view on a particular photographer, history, or subject. Facing Black Star, which is the book that we're celebrating tonight as part of the Collections and Archives stream. This book brings a number of scholars together to illuminate some of the staggering range of the Image Center's Black Star collection. This is a nearly impossible task given the breadth and depth of the collection, so we had to be selective. But in addition to that, our editors asked the book's contributing authors to describe the expectations that they had before undertaking their research, the challenges that they faced, and the results of their work in the print archive of Black Star, which is one of the preeminent distribution agencies operating during the 20th century heyday of photojournalism. There are many, many people that I want to thank this evening. First and foremost, in addition to those on our panel tonight, all the authors and contributors to Facing Black Star, many of whom are here in attendance or joining us online tonight. In alphabetical order, they are Nadia Baer, Denise Burkhofer, Tao Stamani, Vanessa Fleet-Lakewood, Alexandra Gooding, Sophie Hackett, Christiane Yoska, Valerie Matteau, Emily McKibben, Doina Popescu, Mark Seeley, Drew Thompson, and Zainab Verji. I also want to thank our publishing partners at MIT Press. They have been a fantastic and supportive publisher for this series, and we are really honored to have IMC Books with the MIT Press. And I also want to thank the team that supported the creation of Facing Black Star. This includes Anne and Marco Cibola for their wonderful book design, Jillian Watts and Laura Edlund for the expert copy editing, Rachel Sabarin, and before her, Alex Gooding, for coordinating the complex book production and distribution. And finally, the Image Center's wonderful digital specialist, Laura Ramsey, who we thank for making the book's masterful photo reproductions. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers tonight. Please hold your applause until I've introduced all of them. We're honored to welcome here, directly in my right, Dr. Elspeth Brown, our moderator, to lead tonight's discussion. Dr. Brown is Professor of History at the University of Toronto. Her research concerns queer and trans history, the history of photography, the history of US capitalism, and oral history. Dr. Brown is also director of the LGBTQ Oral History Digital Collaboratory, faculty lead for the Critical Digital Humanities Initiative, and she is an active volunteer and former president of the board for the Archives, Canada's LGBTQ2+ archives. Dr. Thierry Gervais, on the end there, is associate professor at Toronto Metropolitan University, director of the university's Film and Photographs Preservation and Collections Management graduate program, and very importantly for us, our head of research here at the Image Center. Dr. Gervais has organized several symposia at the IMC, and he launched the IMC Books series here in 2016. His current research focuses on retouched press photographs. Dr. Vincent Lavoie, directly next to Elspeth, is a professor at the Department of Art History at Université du Québec à Montréal, and a member of the university's Figura Research Center. He is the author of multiple books and essays on photojournalism, and more recently, the principal investigator of a SSHRC-funded research team dedicated to studying the visualities of animal welfare. Dr. Bénédicte Ramade, directly to Vincent's right, is an art historian, critic, and independent curator specializing in environmental issues. Since 2016, Dr. Ramade has focused on the growing entanglement of knowledge and artworks within the Anthropocene, and has developed research on animal points of view and botanical agency. Also in 2016, Bénédicte organized one of the most interesting exhibitions that we've hosted at the Image Center, The Edge of the Earth, Climate Change in Photography and Video. And to Dr. Ramade's right is Dr. Reilley Bishop-Stall. Dr. Bishop-Stall is an art historian whose research centers on Indigenous and settler representational histories, with specific focus on historical and contemporary photography and anti-colonial and activist art. Dr. Bishop-Stall is also assistant professor of Canadian art and visual culture in the Department of Art History at McGill University in Montreal. To all of our wonderful panel, we are so happy that you're joining us tonight. Thank you so much, and good luck. Elspeth, take it away.
We begin. Can everyone hear me okay? It sounds like it. Yep. Thank you so much, amazing audience, both here in person and online, for joining us today to celebrate the publication of this fantastic volume and this amazing exhibition. And I thought I would get the conversation started with just kind of a general opening question for Gervais and Vincent around the, who are the editors, of course, of the volume. I'm curious to learn a little bit about what were your goals for this project? What brought you to put it together?
I feel very anxious.
Because you're going to be graded, Gervais, that's why. So we're all props.
It's because I can see many people in the public who knows a lot about Black Star, and I'm worried that I'm going to miss something, forget something. Okay, I just need to dive in. Well, I mean, it's kind of a long story that started 15 years ago. I think the basic is that we wanted to know better how Black Star was working as an institution, as an organism, selling images. We wanted to better understand the business of news images in general terms. And I also think that we were fascinated by the beast, by Black Star. What do we do with Black Star? What does it mean, 292 and the 91, right, Valérie? Prince, it's big. How do you address this, So I think that's more or less the goals that started the conversation. I think also that when I arrived here in 2008, I was introduced right away to Doina Popescu, who was named the first director of what wasn't called yet the Ryerson Image Center, but became the Ryerson Image Center and is now the Image Center. And I remember the conversation that we had. And I remember Doina asking me, as my field of expertise is photojournalism and press photograph, and she asked me, so what do we do with Black Star? And I remember, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think my answer was, I don't know. I really don't know, because it's so big, we don't have information, we don't know where to start. I mean, we need to start by doing research. And I think that was my answer to Doina. And I think that kind of initiated, I think, the idea of having a research department at the Ryerson Center, the department that I lead, and which is very important to me. I really think that it's important for the Image Center to have such a department, in the museum, on the campus, and especially with a collection like this. And then we started to do some research at the institutional level, and that meant organizing student research workshop to look for the copyright of Black Star in the press, because, as I said, we have no ephemera, or not much ephemera. So we needed to know where they were published. They were meant to be published, but we didn't know where. So that was one way of starting, the research. The second way was to invite people here in our institution to do research. So we did that through a series of symposia, but also with a fellowship program. And I think that up to now, we have welcomed 40 fellows and more than 80 scholars from all around the world to come and look at the collection. So that's what we initiated, that we invited people to come and to do research, because we didn't have enough to understand Black Star. I think I mean, I remember arriving here and I was sure, that we had Black Star, and I would finally understand, what happened between that era, which was the 1920s, and that was really focused on what was happening in Europe. And after that, the 1930s and 40s and 50s, which was focusing about North America, that I would understand with Black Star what was happening.
But it's a really, really difficult collection. I have a personal anecdote. I remember seeing the collection, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, when it was in storage. And I just had to walk away because it was so much of a challenge, because there's no ephemera, there's no archival information to accompany the photographs. The only information is kind of sometimes what's on the back of the images. But Vincent, maybe you want to speak a little bit more about some of the challenges that the collection represents.
I think I have a precise moment when a precise recollection of the very moment when we started to think about this book. The first time I encountered this collection was in November 2016. I came here completely thrilled to be a fellow. I just received a letter from Paul, I guess, at that time, so very proud to come here to dive for the first time in this collection that I didn't know at all. I knew it, but not necessarily practically. So I came with a bunch of information provided by by the staff of the Image Center, and started to do my research. And the first thing I said, I thought, oh, what will I do with that? Because I had the feeling that what I expected, in terms of accessibility to pictures that I thought that was found here, in terms of information that would accompany the images. There is no ephemera. So I said, okay, so I'll be facing some new challenges. And at that time, we were two fellows with Nadia Baer. And I remember one day we were in Thierry's car going to Barry, which was for both of us a very exotic destination to see a photo collection. And we started to share with Nadia, Thierry, and I about what do you feel about these collections? What your research is going on? Do you find what you were expecting? It's not at all. We said, okay. Thierry said, well, this is exactly the feeling that most of the scholars may have. So, and then we thought, why don't we just do something about the hurdles that we encounter first? You know, just to bring together people, curators, independent scholars, fellows, people that have experienced something similar with this collection, and to know what were their way to solve the problem they encountered, you know, when they all hit a sort of wall, because we all came with a specific training, with expectation, with conceptual tools, and we tried to apply that to this monster. This is what you call that, a monster?
The beast, yeah.
Yes, a beast. Okay, well. And but sometimes it doesn't work. So you have to think differently. And this is probably one of the best things that happened to me. I mean, in terms of scholarly activity, to find a way, I would like to swim in this collection and not to be drowned by it. You know?
Well, maybe we can think about a particular lifeboat. I'm wondering if Bénédicte or Reilley, you can speak a bit more specifically about your contributions to the volume and how you navigated some of these challenges with this particular collection. Reilley, do you want to start?
Yeah, you first.
Sure, thank you. My obstacles were many, like everybody's, and a little bit different for the fact that although I contributed to this book on this collection, this is actually my first time at the Image Center and in this amazing place. And so I ended up writing this very much in isolation, and my research became not what I intended it to be in different ways. So when I was approached by Thierry and Vincent to ask if I was interested in writing something, I was initially sent like an internal link to see, you know, what we had, what was digitized, and what I might find interesting to come and research. And I was so excited to have the opportunity to come and research. And I found initially I was sort of already perplexed by the database, the different ways of cataloging that existed, because this collection has been translated, has morphed from, you know, press to research, et cetera. And I found myself really fixated on certain things that became my chapter, as I was at the time living in Montreal and was looking after vulnerable people, and we kept having wave after wave of COVID. So my travel never came, and yet my research kept going kind of obsessively with through this hidden link, this internal link that I had, in which you could see these various stages of trying to make sense of the collection, and a way of sort of cataloging it in the sort of simplest sense on a database, you know, not physical.
Can you just tell us a little bit about what, in general terms, the essay is about?
Yeah,
We're going to wrap the metadata challenges around the
Okay,
topic.
yeah. So my essay became about search terms ultimately, because in each collection that I would see, there'd be an image. There'd be the Black Star, originally the Black Star catalog heading. There would be something from the Image Center, and in between there was something called Tagosaurus terms. And I had no idea what these were at first, and they were sort of descriptive terms. And I became really fixated on a first set of terms. They were alphabetical on one image that was of two Indigenous children swinging upside down. And there was really no information like usual. And it had like no ephemera, no nothing really much with it. And then in the list of terms near the end, alphabetically, the last three terms were smile, social issues, swing. And I was looking at this picture of laughing, playing children, and I was like, yeah, they're smiling. Yeah, they're swinging. What are the social issues? And I started wondering about this term more. And the more I searched through the collection, I found this one term, among other strange terms, attached to images that the context wasn't clear. It was often in under subject headings that had to do with drug use, activism, things where you could see what terms might have led to that idea. But then it was also consistently applied to images of Black and Indigenous people, and particularly Indigenous children, which connects to sort of my broader research. So that's where I started focusing. And I became really perplexed, what is this? And I ultimately learned that Tagosaurus was basically an experiment for the Image Center a number of years ago, 2016, no. It's in the chapter. So when the images are trying to, again, tame this beast or make sense of this beast, looked into hiring a metadata company, a private company who had actually done Magnum photo archives, tagged them before. And this was a company that it was really innovative at that moment, that was using a combination of machine learning and crowdsourcing to come up with tag terms. An experiment that ultimately, the Image Center abandoned use of it. You see the sort of shortcomings of it, but was an exciting idea to use this sort of technology, which I hope maybe we'll have a chance to talk about now. I mean, that's an early example of AI, the conversations that we're all having now, of where this is going to go from there. I don't want to take up any more time.
Thank you. My research is a little bit different because I've been invited by the Image Center in 2014 to curate a show not about Black Star, with contemporary artworks and contemporary photographies. And Black Star was the cherry on the cake. It was a bonus. So, oh, we have Black Star if you want to have a look. I said, oh, yeah, sure. I wasn't aware about, I just knew that Black Star was a kind of huge press image bank, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And I was absolutely sure that I would find nothing because I was working on climate change, and climate change is a really recent notion. So I said, okay, sure, let's have a look. I will find, I know, 5 or 4 pictures. 1,300 pictures later, with keywords such as ecology, which is not a term that we use a lot nowadays. But I realized that in the 60s and 70s, ecology was really the word. And so many subsections under this word, and a lot of pictures. And what was interesting was not really specific pictures of Santa Barbara oil spill, which is really a key moment on the environmental issues history. Neither Seveso explosion in Italy in 1976 was not something very clear. It was really common air pollution, waste pollution, water pollution, the common topics. I thought, oh, it's interesting because it's really the visual archaeology of what we're used to see in the news since 3 decades. And that's how it started, very empirically. And then with the invitation of Vincent and Thierry, I started to rethink to this process and see how much I was unconscious, because I just saw that, oh, there's no information with the picture. Cool. I can really write a fiction about climate change and about environmental issues and about visual tropes. And I felt very free to do it with these pictures and put them in the show and think, how do we show archivals on a show? And I was just looking at this picture for their aesthetical interest and their beauty, because I had no information. So I felt totally free to really focus on really heartbreaking pictures. When you see this monkey fur and his hand on the PowerPoint that draws, it's one of the pictures I found. And this image struck me. And it was really the freedom I had. It was really different because you started with Blackstar with a goal, with an intention. It sounded like really a kid in a candy store. It was really fun.
It's the perfect collection for you then.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, let's go for it. I mean, there's so many ways in which really the book could be about the challenges of metadata, right? And discoverability, because I think there's 291,000 images, right? So how do you even get through all of those images, right? And this is a challenge that any scholar is going to have. So how things are categorized, what kind of terms people use, this is how it is that we come to find the images. And this is where the politics can lie as well. But I'm going to segue a little bit because the book, just as you will soon discover when you buy it at the end of our fabulous event that we're doing here, it's organized into 3 different sections. One is on origins, a second is on visibilities, and the third section is on curating. So I'm going to shift to having a question about the second section, which is around visibilities and invisibilities. And I'm wondering, one of the central themes is what the modalities of invisibilization, but I think that's a term that Mark Seeley might be using, which archivists might refer to this as symbolic annihilation within the archive, the ways in which certain histories become visible and other histories and other identities are obscured or erased by the archive. So I'm wondering if you can discuss a little bit some of the strategies that folks who contributed to the volume deployed in order to address some of the archival absences that are part of the archive, or sometimes perhaps the overrepresentation of, say, visual cliches, for example, that some of the scholars had to navigate.
I think Reilley gave us some insight about that. When you look at this collection, so the subject headings, all the words that you are using in order to browse in it, have been chosen for different purposes than for historian of photography. There are terms that have been chosen, to tell me if I'm wrong, Thierry, for business purposes, and in order to meet the client's requirements. So there is a functionality attached to these words that goes to the sphere of business. So when you came with your idea with new words, it's a huge collection, but with the terms that you have, you could get 1, 2, or 3 images. So if there is something, there is no match. So what does it mean? It means that you have to think differently and to process a sort of a translation operation from, I would say, a business mindset to a historian of photography mindset. And you have to translate the term and to try to think about terms that would provide possibly a bunch of pictures. That was ecology for you. That was a trial for me. I tried first forensic, crime. Now, when I typed trial, I got a bunch of images. Okay, I said, so it means that trial was a keyword for a press agency because the clients are, it's a word that they share. They know the meaning of that, and it resonates to potential client. I'm coming to the question about the invisibility. So it means that there are biases. We know that all archives, the way they are constructed, categorized, named, built up. So they have biases. It's possible that you don't see the images you are thinking about. And you have to find a way to get, I would say, mute images or invisible images to extract the images from the archives, you know, by using probably a different culture. I'm thinking about one of the authors, Sophie Hackett. Her article is about the invisibility of the queer-related topics in the archive. She found images, but not enough, not a lot, about 300, you know. And she suspected that a lot of other images are there, but how to get them? But she used her own knowledge of the queer culture, because she knew the personality, she knew the codes, the visual culture, and for her it was a way to get more results. But sometimes the scholar have to experience realities in order to have the keys to, I would say, to unlock the safe, you know, or to crack the safe. So this is certainly one of the strategies that suddenly make visible images that were there, but for whom it was impossible with the words available to get to them. Yeah,
It's a great example. Others want to jump in on this?
I could jump in if that's
Mhm,
right.
sure.
Yeah, I think the research that I ended up doing encompassed even sort of a third transformation of the collection. So you have the search terms for business, then two for researchers, and then this experiment of using a metadata company was, the company was trying to do the sort of search terms we put into Google that will find an image that will, you know, encompassing something. So it goes to, I don't know what you would call that, popular sort of understanding. And certainly it therefore, the invisibilities that that come out when looking at that kind of terminology. Of course, I was up against Black Star's terminology that was racist slurs, you know, outdated terms that I knew when I go into archives, I know that's what I kind of have to look for. But when finding these new terms that seem to bring in that same bias was sort of showing me that, you know, machines learn human bias, right? Because humans make machines. So it remains, and this idea of invisibility is, it does, you said something about, you know, silencing certain or invisibilizing certain histories or certain perspectives. What I found in some of these images that you can take, you know, for instance, an image of a joyful child and replace that joy with concern by these sort of learned biases. And so there was a way of also kind of a hyper visualization of the stereotype put on top of an image that then sort of erases what you might actually see. Yeah, so kind of went.
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate maybe what Vincent was highlighting is the fact that the indexation of that collection is, when it arrives to you, you think, oh, wow, that's organized, you know, and there is a logic behind, you know, that organization. And as soon as you start, you know, scratching the surface of that, you realize that it's not logical, that it doesn't work, that some words are here. Sometimes it's organized by themes, and suddenly it's by authors. So you say, okay, so some authors were pulled, but no, they were not pulled from that. I mean, it's actually a mess. So my point here is that the first thing that all the researchers had to do, including ourselves, it's to fight the structure, to fight that, to understand it and to dismantle it in order to reappropriate it and make something out of it. And I think that's, for me, that was the beauty of that work. It's the fact that, you know, you can't put Black Star in a box. It doesn't work. I mean, like all the collections of photographs, that's what I think. It's, you can always revisit them. And I think that's Tina Kemp who talked about fugitivity and the fact that, you know, you cannot, you know, says this is it. This is how you will understand that collection, you know, according to that structure. It can always escape it. The thing is, it's up to us to allow that collection to escape, you know, and escape indeed the market of news. I think that's, you know, we are coming back to the first goal that I mentioned at the beginning. They had a goal, and the goal was to sell images to the news. Yeah, partially, and also to other companies, but the goal was to sell. So, and they were not archivists. You know, they didn't know how to organize the collection. So, and they were multiple. So see, I'm adding layers here, and ultimately, and all together, over 60 years or more, they put together a collection, and here we are. This is what we have here now. So that's the move from the private to the public. Okay, that's how it was built in the private sector. Okay, with some goals, and the methodology. I don't know what was behind this, but this is what we got here at the Image Center. And I think that Alex Goodin, who's here, talked about the fact that coming from the FPPCM program, she was very attentive to what we call the respect des fonds, which is basically you when you acquire a collection, you keep the organization, you know, to keep the historical knowledge of that collection. Well, that's what we did. But ultimately, we have to dismantle it. And I think that's the first attempt, the book, at doing that.
Well, we've talked a lot about some of the kind of back-end challenges in terms of metadata and organization and structure. I'm wondering if we could shift a little bit to talk about the photographs themselves as you encountered them as researchers. Can you speak a little bit about what are some of the images that spoke to you or that surprised you, that pulled you, if you will, when you were encountering them in your research, that you wanted to write about or learn more about? Maybe some of them, of course, are here on display now.
Yeah, of course. The monkey series from Hiroshi Takagi has been shot in 1978 in Minamata, Japan, which is a famous, dramatically famous place for mercury poisoning case. Discovered beginning of 70s industrial poisoning, and these have been discovered in western part of the world from Eugene Smith's series Minamatas. He shot with his wife Aiko. And what I found in Black Star was some pictures from Eugene Smith, but it was really problematic to show them. And what I found was really new to me and to most of the people, it was these 3 or 4 pictures from Hiroshi Takagi showing that the mercury poisoning was not just a human question, but was impacting also all nature, all the living being around. And these pictures of these young macaques are totally, the bones of the hand are totally deformed by the disease, and he holds the father's mother. And I thought it was so striking because it's practically human hand. And I thought it was so powerful to make the link for the people who knew the story of Minamatas. So for the photograph historians in the public of my show, but also just to figure out that Minamatas was also another story. And these pictures showed it, but it was really a discovery for me. And showing this picture, it was really, okay, in the breaking nature section of my show, it was really, I wanted only these pictures because it was really a kind of shock. And that's the kind of image I found. And on the contrary, Jean Daniels, which is one of the key photographers of the show right now of stories from the picture press, took some really strange pictures of air pollution in Los Angeles. It was like Ed Rush's series. It was so artistic. I said, oh my God, I need to show them, but differently from the others. I need to artificialize really these pictures because they're not press pictures. They're really art. And that's the decision I took to make them really important into the story of Black Star. So that's the two things that were really different in all the images I found in the collection. Righty?
Sure. Yeah, again, I guess so much of my research, which I have done outside of this and which brought me to how I originally approached the collection, deals with images that make me profoundly sad, right? And press images in general too, this sort of emotional quality. Walking through this exhibition, you're confronted with so much trauma and suffering, human suffering, animal suffering, the earth. And so when I started looking through the collection, that first image that I mentioned of these children on a swing, and a number of children, I ended up focusing largely on photos of smiling children, which was such a breath of fresh air. And that's why I was so sort of struck by the weird description of them. And to spend so much time with images of joyful looking children, I started to wonder also, were these ever published? And because we don't know if they were successfully sold, right? And they don't fit what we commonly see as an image that will define a social issue or something. So I don't actually know if they were ever published, and if they were, in what context. So, but it really was, therefore, I don't know, revelatory to see that these exist in press archives, because those are not the images that are so often shared. So what else exists in the archive, whether it was published or not, that tells a bigger story, or lets you come into a story from a different angle. Yeah,
that's great. It reminds me of one of the comments that Mark Seeley made in his contribution in the interview with him around the kind of emotional journey of being in the archive and dealing with images, usually, as you're suggesting, of trauma or violence, and the effective toll that it can take on a researcher as you're dealing with these very difficult images. So I totally get why you segued to a more joyful, but then you ran into the problems. That's how it is, right? So I'm wondering, now that you're at the end of this project and it's been published, it's here between covers, if you can tell us a little bit about what you learned from the experience, and what you might do differently if you had to do it all over again. That might be a loaded question. Maybe just the first part of that.
I would actually come and see the collection if I had the chance. Yeah.
Minor details.
No, it's a very interesting question. I'm glad it's done. It's like it's finished. I think it was very long. It was, it was 15 years, and doing research at different levels. Personal level. I mean, you were talking about what images struck you. I mean, for me, that was the Eugene Smith Saipan, just because I was really well acquainted to Smith and finding Smith in the collection, and suddenly you look at all of these 6 prints by Smith, and one is reversed, and I just loved it because it's like it meant so much about how they were handling the images. It's like, let's reverse one, because you know what, it might be useful for publication somewhere. And so, well, yeah, no, let's not get into the details. Yeah, I'm glad it's finished, and I'm looking forward to do it again, but with other tools. I think I'm very grateful for the support I receive from Dorina Popescu, from Paul Ross, in the Image Center, to give me the means to develop, some research at the institutional level by, inviting people over, doing research workshops with students. I mean, I can only say that I'm very lucky because I think it's rare to have the possibility of doing something like this. And
Yeah, just creating the database alone. I mean, just think about that. All of the information, all the categories. I mean,
I think Denise, correct me if I'm wrong, but we are not done with the digitization of the images. And no. Okay, so, and it's been 15 years. So it's a very long process. We need help. I think or money. Right, Denise, you're right. I think there are hope. I mean, that's my point of view. But I always try to see the glass half full. But I think there is hope. Yeah. I mean, I talked with some researchers who are inquiring about AI, and I've been reading a bit about that, and about the pitfall of what has been happening, how to recognize a table, in a big body of, which is difficult to recognize a table, but I think they are actually flipping the problem, and instead of looking inside the image, they are looking outside of the image. And it has always been an approach of mine, which is to look at the context in order to understand the images. I've always thought that the meaning, I mean, I'm not like Roland Barthes, that the meaning of a photograph depends on how you look at it and where you look at it. And therefore, I think it's important to understand the outside of the photograph. And that actually maybe AI, could help us to do. And that would be fabulous. So yeah, let's start it again. It's that's my my approach of the beast.
How about anyone else want to weigh in on what you feel that you've learned, or how you're feeling about the project now at the end?
I feel great. I can't stop thinking about this visual archaeology. I just touched a little bit by the finger, and thanks for the opportunity to make me think again about this process, because mine was totally empirical. Building an exhibition is not making a research, a strict research. I was totally whimsy and distracted, and maybe non-ethical, playing with the images like, oh, there's no context, I can do whatever I want. And after that, with this commission making, writing an article, said, oh my God, I didn't ask myself, I didn't realize maybe it has been published, but I don't know. And that's how it started. And try to figure out, and now I can't stop being obsessed with all these pictures from the 60s and how it turned ecological, and before it was nature photography, and it turned ecological at the end of 60s, and what happened exactly in Northern America. And that's an obsession now. Thanks, guys. And it's really cool because, all our visual culture is changing right now with AI, but also because the climate change crisis is no more a crisis. It's a new state of being and evolving in this world. So I said, okay, at this time, crisis was a little bit different too. It was not really crisis. And so I found a lot of similarities. So I can't stop working about this. Yeah.
Sounds like an exhibition on Documerica, maybe, for example.
Oh,
I
have to say
2026 here. No, I'm just kidding.
the same thing for me. I have not been able to stop thinking about the chapter, the work I was doing. It's become generative for sure, like it is ongoing. So again, yeah, thank you for this. No, it really has. It's led to sort of other research that I'm continuing. Of course, the AI, right after this book published, everybody's was talking about AI, right? And it was really interesting to see this, how different the machine intelligence that we're talking about right now is from this early experiment. But it brings up so many questions for me that I cannot stop ruminating on. And also it brings, I think one of the other things that has I learned and or struck me and has been ongoing for me is I'm more and more considering audience rather than necessarily subject or maker, which obviously the subject, these are what these terms were focused on, but there was a separate bias I thought was written into that kind of tagging, which was not just who appeared in the picture, but who the system imagined would be researching. You know, and it came to a similar default position. I'm not going to explain, you know, in like actual examples, partly because I would have to use terms that I don't want to use out loud, that are repeated, but you can see that there's the different assumptions in there. And so that's been something I've been considering a lot more looking in press.
That's all.
Well, of course, I learned a lot about Black Star. And also, I would say that as editor, I learned a lot about the contributors. It was not obvious to ask someone to work on a topic that was addressed by this person 10 years ago, 5 years ago, when we say, do you remember you came in 2017, you did that. Would you agree to work on that again? But not the way you think. We have an idea. So it was sometimes delicate because usually when you ask an author to contribute, you ask him or her for a specific expertise, and you ask, what are you working on these days? I would be interested to know, and you will probably publish that. Or on a specific area, you know, part of an expertise. This is not what we did. We have an idea. And in terms of methodology, epistemology, and we think that, what was the problem you had 5 years ago when you came here? Wow, I don't really remember. What do you mean by problem that I had? Do you have to explain? We did a lot of pedagogy, and we discussed a lot with the authors, all the contributors, and sometimes from most of them, 1, 2, 3 versions of the text, just in order to follow a sort of a work in progress and to really put the focus on not the topic, but on the solution and the strategy, and on the ways to solve the frustration that they have for the reason we explained earlier. So it takes time. It was a quite demanding endeavor, but really, really rewarding. So this is something that, as editor, that was very, very specific. So, and not usual.
No, totally unusual. Yeah, you were really demanding, but in a good way. Thank you.
And to do it with Thierry, I mean, to be two for doing that, with all the discussion that we had, we discussed a lot. It was really, really rewarding and very, very interesting. So I thank him again for the invitation. Yeah.
I'd like to just say one thing in terms of you talking about the editorial process, because it was, for me, as you well know, I would propose a chapter, I'd propose an idea, and then I wouldn't be able to come. And it kept changing, and every obstacle that I hit and an idea I had, and fixation, both editors were so accommodating to letting me sort of talk through it, work through it, find different ways around. And I found this process and in contributing to this book really, really adventurous and exciting in that sense, and was so appreciated that I had the room to change my mind, to change my route, and do this. So yeah, I know it was a lot of communication. The amount of communication that you had with me, if you are doing that with every contributor, then it's a big.
They did with everyone.
They did.
Yeah.
It was a big project then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, I think it might be time to turn to our audience to see if folks might have questions. But before we do that, may I ask you to join me in a round of applause for our fabulous speakers? And we'll be doing that again later. So this is just a warm up for the applause. So just to remind you, we do have microphones. And so we have two folks who will be bringing a microphone, not both of them, just one of them to you when you're ready to pose your question. And if you could wait until you get the microphone, that would be great because of the online component. And we do have questions that are going to be coming in through the chat that Paul will be keeping an eye on. So would anyone like to start us off with a question for one of our panelists or for all of them? Yes, please. And here comes the mic. It's running towards you with a person attached to it. Thank you.
Without getting into too much detail as to what my background is, I've been in situations where it was in a residency in Mapoon, Australia, on the eastern coast, exploring and digging up ghost nets with the village. And what we found, because I was due to the installation that we were all creating, I was looking for images of what it was like before. And the rangers, I think they're called the Gulf of Carpentaria Rangers, a woman called me up and said, we found a box about 10 months ago in an old storage unit that had something like 600 photographs of the residential school that was in that particular area of Mapoon. And as a result of it, no one knows what to do with it, but I can get you copies. And she did, and we hung them in the installation. But the question is, what do you do with collections, if you like, that aren't under some kind of governance? And when they're found, how does that then follow through?
That's a great question. It's a really big question. I'm wondering, would any one of the panelists like to weigh in on this one?
I think that you're probably facing the same kind of obstacle that everybody are when you are where there is a lack of information. You know, if you have to try to define the social biography of images, it means for what purpose this images has been done, who did these pictures, haven't they published somewhere? You have to reconstruct the biography of an images. If you don't have that, you are sort of stuck. You know, it's really hard to work with and to create a narrative. In order to create an image alone, it's mute, I would say. It has to be linked to discourses, intentions, contexts, and otherwise it's really hard to do something. So yes, this is the beginning of probably a beginning of a big inquiry. Yeah, that might be absolutely passionate, but it's really hard to if you don't have anything else, then the picture there is nothing written on the back, for instance. You know?
I'm not an archivist. The thing is,
Use the microphone, please.
I'm not an archivist, but what was interesting is that I was troubled by it because it was something, and I had found the same thing with Pierre Esprit Radisson in his trials with the Hudson's Bay Company, having to go to the British Library to look up the court.
Yeah.
And no one knows anything about these things. And it was very interesting to hear your reactions to finding things that no one really knows about until you do it.
Mm-hmm. Especially in your case, you're describing a collection that is almost orphaned, if you will. It's kind of vulnerable. And then the politics and the ethics of care around who's going to look after that collection. Should it be an indigenous community? Do they have the resources to look after it? Should it go to a state archive? Who's going to spend the time figuring out all of that? You're probably on a plane the next day, you know, all of these issues. So it's very, it's very emotionally intense because one has, and this is a direction of some of the archives literature that I find really persuasive and moving right now, is the ethics of care, not only to the record, to the objects themselves, the photographs, but also the ethics of care to the communities that are imbricated with that history. And what is one's ethical relationship to those communities? And this is where conversations around, post-custodial approaches to collections, is collecting it and within an archive always the best strategy, et cetera. So it's a really dense set of conversations that I think are worth discussing. So yeah, thank you. Great question. More questions. We do have, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks so much for this talk. This was great. I'm on the other side of things, so I'm a documentary photographer. And, in our industry, we're talking a lot about the ethics of care and thinking about that in real time. So for example, most recently on assignment, thinking about in a refugee camp, what it means to, push your camera into a tent of children's laughter, or make portraits of moody portraits of racialized people bathing in the ocean. Knowing that this is likely the lowest point of their lives, and what does it mean to press and click that shutter, and where does it go next? So these are sort of the things we're thinking of in real time. And then I was thinking about how then on the research side of things later on, when it comes across your desk as a researcher or an archivist, how or do you navigate building a framework of care and ethics to think about whether preservation is perpetuation, and how do you navigate, as you talked about, visibilities and invisibilities. How did that come together for you in this project or perhaps others? Thank you.
Wonderful question. Does anyone want to jump in?
That's a fantastic question. I think that for me, when I'm approaching images, particularly images of vulnerable people or vulnerable situations, and with some sort of distance, temporal distance perhaps, for me the question becomes about not so much the collecting or the archiving as much as the continued circulation, and how so some images that can have such an important impact in moment for showing a crisis, exposing, making the invisible visible, when it needs to be to open a conversation, maybe to actually to judicial change, something like that. After a while, when the action maybe has been taken or the moment has passed to some degree or has evolved, the continued circulation, you do have that risk of sort of re-traumatizing audiences, community members. And so in a way, maybe placed in researchers' hands rather than running wild on the internet or something, as so many images do, I think is, that is the thing with, is even when speaking of digitizing collections, which is so important for researchers today, there's that slipping out of the hands into a sort of wild and messy space that I think is, especially if we're turning more to looking at artificial intelligence and the use of these collections, needs to be really, really carefully handled.
Anyone else?
Well, I think that you connect first. You connect with experts. You get informed. You get educated. And indeed, you don't use the social media just to show what you found. You take the time to do research, and that's the same thing for the shoebox. I think the first thing you do is to protect. You protect because I think the most important from my point of view is to preserve this, and because if they are orphaned, they might later on not be orphaned anymore. And then you have communities, and you connect with the communities, and you involve them in the research. I mean, that's for me the first step. Of course, I have my approach. You know, I've been doing research for a few years, so I look for certain things. When I look at Blastar, I looked at things that were obviously very different from what you were looking at, guys. But I think being cautious, you know, of how you are using the images is the first thing you do.
Wonderful. I believe we do have one question from the chat that Paul will read out loud.
We actually have a couple of questions that are related to one another, both from eminent photo historians. Dr. Antonella Palazzari writes, did you have a model in mind based on other photo agencies on how to work with Blackstar before you started? And what can the work that has happened with Blackstar propose to that of multiple other photo agencies that have not been explored in such depth?
Well, hi, Antonella.
Oh, it's like, can one say that? No.
I think I'm not sure I got the second part of the question, but the first part of the question, I remember working on the agency Roll, ROL, in France, and it was at the National Library, and it was similar, like the numbers were as big, and the information coming with was also very minimal. And I remember that I was working alone at that time. I got a grant to, you know, dig in that collection, and based on previous research I did, and it was a failure. It was just literally a because I didn't know how to address the numbers. We talked about the materiality of the Blackstar collection, but the materiality of the Roll collection was also very interesting because they were glass plates. Laura Ramsey, I mean, you've been digitizing so many glass plates. So how do you handle these objects? It was very difficult, and again, I think it was a failure. So based on that, I realized that I couldn't do things alone about press agencies. That was my realization, Antonella, when I worked on Roll, and that, you know, I needed an institutional environment to develop research at another scale. And I think that's what we are dealing with, because we're talking about here, I mean, 291,000 prints, but the Globe and Mail, which has been dispersed between the Archive of Ontario, the National Gallery, and there is another place that I can't remember, but we're talking about 2 million images. So what do you do with 2 million images? So I think that's to finish, maybe, I mean, the Roll experience, I mean, when I worked on Roll, was first realizing that that was a failure, and second, the fascination for the numbers. I think that's also the beauty of photography. It's always escaping you, you know, it's like a fish that you can grab, you know, and I think that's that was the fascination also is behind that project. And Paul, I think I didn't, yeah, the second part of the question, I'm not sure I heard you properly.
The second part of the question is about whether the research that's been done in Blackstar so far can inform approaches to other photo press agency archives.
Do you want more?
What do you think, Manon? Do you think that we've informed, you know, research about other agencies?
Well, because my experience with before Blackstar, my experience was totally different. It was with the Notman archive, Notman photographic archive. It was exactly the opposite of Black Star because we have everything. I mean, you have the pictures, you have the glass plates, you have the records, the picture books, all the books, and all the name of the clients.
All the prices also?
Of the clients. Oh yes,
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
because yeah.
Okay.
So it was exactly the opposite. You have everything. But I had the feeling that this archive was sort of locked. I mean, you have everything. There is nothing loose in this archive, which is absolutely different than Black Star. So these two opposite models are certainly instructive about, I would say, the scope of the different kind of mindset you could have when you are approaching a collection.
Another question from Jonathan Dentler. Jonathan asks, and I think that anyone on the panel can answer this. He says, I'm curious what major new insights this project was able to generate about Black Star, the agency, its structure and functionality within a larger photojournalistic and media landscape. He acknowledges that that seems like a really difficult thing because, as you mentioned on numerous occasions in the panel, any researcher is faced with a lack of textual documents in archival context. But nevertheless, what approaches did contributors take to resolving this dilemma, understanding Black Star in its time?
Hi, Jonathan. Yeah, it's a very good question. So basically, what did we achieve, and are we more successful here? Well, I think that, yeah, I think we've achieved a few things about photojournalism. I think Nadia's text about the beginning of Black Star is key, how the market was important in the mind of the three German immigrants who came to New York, and you know what the business represented for them and how they organized it. I think we've learned about that. I think that's something interesting. The other part is also the demystification of some aspect of photojournalism. Yeah. I mean, we've been hearing and reading about Black Star and how they were renewing photojournalism, how they fed life, and having done the math a bit, you realize that they published 9,230, if I'm remembering correctly, images in life over 36 years. So, and I started to do something in the intro to make something of that number. What does it mean, you know, 9,000 and something? So it means 2.5% of the images published in life. So the demystification, I think, is also a first step. I think we, especially when we deal with photojournalism, which is built on myth. I mean, I think Vincent, you could talk about that probably much better than doing it right now. But so demystifying is something important. Realizing that, I mean, the success of some of the photographers in the Black Star collection was because they had a small ego, not a big ego, not Kappa, not Smith, no. They had a small ego, and they were technically very skilled, and they were capable of producing a lot and providing images, and that is what actually ensured the publication of their images. So see, putting things upside down, and I should look at my students because that's always what I'm asking them to do, which is to, when you think it's happening this way, try the other way, because sometimes you learn a lot by doing that. And I think that, Jonathan, that's one of the things that we are learning through that experience, is the fact that we need to write another history of photojournalism or another history of press photograph, because the one we know, well, it's not what was happening in the press, and I think that's one of the learning outcome of that experience.
Yes, I agree. I think that some of the authors from the first part of the book about the origin of Black Star, propose a sort of alternative narrative of the beginning of photojournalism. So most of the history of photojournalism has been written by the photographers themselves, or the sellers and the brokers. So it's certainly sort of a really golden history. And when you look more carefully about the works, and when you dig in the archive, so you find the material that it is useful to create an alternative history of photojournalism. And I think that something we started to do with this book, thanks to the authors for the first part of this.
Yes? Oh,
Wait.
may I ask you to wait just a second, because the mic is heading your way. Thank you.
How about the origin of the name Black Star? So,
Oh, Thierry.
Valerie, could you help me on this?
Sure. If I remember all the details, this is in Zoe Smith, PhD dissertation that dates from the late 80s, early 90s. And the story she was told from Ernst Mayr is that Kurt Kornfeld arrived with an understanding of the press and what letterpress looked like and what every printer would have in a print box. And alongside lowercase and uppercase letters was a very limited selection of symbols. And one of those symbols was a 5-sided star. Knowing that the press would often use black ink, it made it very easy. The early versions of the logo didn't have the name accompanying the star. It was just the black star. Doina Popescu also, I remember in a lot of the research that we did with some of the early artists working on archival dialogues, would often like to add that also 3 German Jews fleeing Nazi Germany. We can't underestimate the symbolism of a star and the importance of a star in that context. That's what I have off the cuff.
Thank you. And I take the opportunity to say that Valerie Valerie Matto and Alex Gooding wrote the chronology at the beginning of the book, which is a source of key information for everyone who is interested in Black Star. And in Black Star, in our institution, we have 2 layers, for that chronology, the life of Black Star itself, and since it has been acquired by the institution, and what we've been doing since with it, because it doesn't stop. I mean, the market is still alive of Black Star, but the Black Star collection is still alive, and it's continuing. It's never stopped. It's an event, right?
Yeah, we have a question over here. Oh, here comes the mic right behind you.
Thank you. It's really informative. I really appreciated the talk and all your stimulating, discussions. And I'm looking forward to looking into the book as well. My question is really in terms of, it's kind of a meta question, I guess. Given the fact that, there's a range of archives and collections from the very lockdown, as you say, and then the very open. I mean, how might this openness also generate, and what I see or what I know from just hearing you is that it's generated rich methodologies of inquiry that then ask critical questions about the way that the way we approach images in relation to what's outside the image as a shorthand for context and ethics and politics. It seems so rich in an institution that's attached to a university as well as a vibrant kind of art community. And I think it's a gift. And I'm wondering, do you think that, I'm not really sure the history of artists that have been involved. You mentioned that there have been projects. What that also has generated in terms of approaches that have been generative in terms of methodology in particular.
I mean, I'm just to follow up, I don't know if this is kind of what you're getting at a little bit. I mean, have there been ways of activating the archive, working collaboratively with artists, engaging with the archive? Is that kind of?
Yeah, I just am more struck by the fact when something is this open-ended and it's, and we're evolving in terms of how we ask questions. I think we talk about visibility, invisibility, you know, ethics of care, communities that aren't represented, how communities are represented, et cetera, and the ethics of re-traumatizing, and the ethics of beyond the human, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many things that have been brought up. And I'm just wondering if that's not a gift, that you've got this situation where it's raised the questions themselves to grapple with. It seems like grappling was something that was really important in approaching this collection, but also approaching how to, what perspectives to bring, who's going to talk about this guy, and how you, the many iterations of, you know, the questions.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, I agree with you. I think it's a gift. It's a gift because, again, I mean, that collection is not in a box. And I think that from my point of view, as I try to define myself as a photo historian, you know, photography, it's again, it's the fish, you know, the thing that you cannot grasp ever. And I think that the Black Star collection, you know, really incarnated that. And I think that it's very interesting then to study, even from the photojournalistic point of view, which is very specific and about Black Star, you know, even in that context, you know, it's always escaping you. But I want to say that I also think that it's a very appropriate collection for an institution like ours. And I think since the beginning, we have ceaselessly, you know, questioned that collection in many different directions. I mean, archival dialogue was asking, you know, to Canadian artists to go through the collection and to make something out of it, whatever they were ready to do with. Paul has always been asking curators to incorporate, you know, some of the collection in their work here in the main gallery. I think, and from the research point of view, we are. We've been asking scholars to come here to study the way they want, and that's the beauty of it, because I think we can learn from that. But it's always starting with that collection. So and even with, I mean, with our students, it's very interesting. You know, you should see their face when you show 6 prints by Eugene Smith that are totally different with no information in the back, and you ask them, so what do you think? What are you going to do with that? And you know, and then you start, you know, you start beginning and to make something out of this. That could be different. I mean, but you take an approach, you take an angle, and go for it.
Well, it's been really stimulating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we are closing in on the end of our time, but we do have room for one more question in the back, and then we will conclude. Oops.
I'm wondering about the question of suppression. So did you see that there were some photos that were given to them? They're like, no, this can't go on. It was suppressed, or with your research, was there things too graphic or things still too sensitive? You're like, we cannot include it. It needs to be suppressed.
Well, suppressed is a strong term, but I'll leave it up to you to say.
No. I mean, I didn't have the feeling that we were omitting some images because they were too graphics. I think we've paid attention to publish them in an appropriate context to be approached and seen with an apparatus that could help people to look at these images. I think that's our work. You know, by doing research, you know, to provide the context that I was referring to earlier. And I think that first, you know, it's a book. It's not something on social media. You take that book and you open it and you read it, and you see it's a it requires time, which is probably the opposite of the social media. Okay, you like it or you not like it, and you move and you cancel. This is the opposite here. That's what I think. You know, you take the time to maybe understand and question and disagree, but on the basis of, I hope, a rigorous work.
Okay, well, I'll invite Paul to close our evening tonight.
Thank you all so much. Can we please have a round of applause for our wonderful panel? I want to thank all of you who joined us here in person or online. Thank you so much for being part of this evening. I do want to mention, for those of you who have not been, that we are hosting this panel in the context of a significant exhibition exploring the history of Black Star, and it is called Stories from the Picture Press, Black Star Publishing Company, and the Canadian Press. It includes the Canadian Press in order to give context to some absences within Black Star. And we would love to have you see this exhibition. So please do come if you have not. I also want to mention that Facing Black Star is available to purchase here in our bookstore, also on our website and our online store, or at the MIT Press website. Thank you again. Have a great evening.